Hey folks, welcome back to Ruby Rogues. This week, it looks like it's just me. We kind of took a break from recording for a little while, but I'm back at it, and I had some stuff to talk about, so I'm going to just jump in and talk about some of the stuff that's going on out there in the Ruby community. Just to give a little bit of context on how I expect this to flow, effectively, I'm just going to kind of explain what I've been able to gather is happening. I'll probably interject my opinion or feelings on things as I go. And then at the end, I'll give some conclusions as far as what I think we ought to be thinking or doing regarding the situation with Ruby Central and RubyGems. I'm also going to be gearing up and recording more episodes. So, and I'd like to add another host or two to this show. So if you're interested, feel free to email me, chuck@topenddevs.com. I've also got some other stuff coming just to kind of give you all a heads up. I'm going to start recording a Ruby tip of the day, and so that'll be a daily podcast. It'll probably be 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll just explain some stuff. And I'm planning on putting out some video content related to that, right? So I'll explain the concepts behind a thing, and hey, you probably want to do this, or you probably want to do this instead of that, and then do a quick video demo and show you what the difference is. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the situation with Rocky Mountain Ruby, with Ruby Central. I kind of Freudian slipped, I guess, with mentioning Rocky Mountain Ruby. I was at Rocky Mountain Ruby a week or so ago. There were a number of people who are involved in the whole Ruby Central situation that were there. I'm not going to attribute anything to any one person because I kind of got the story from a handful of people that are involved and then another handful of people who have been following things pretty closely. And I don't want to represent that what I've gathered is necessarily the opinion or, any kind of statement from anybody who's involved. Because honestly, I'm not sure if I remember which details came from which people. And so anyway, I feel like I've been able to gather more information than what's kind of out there at the moment. So we can dive into that. One other thing is that if you're looking for me to take sides on, these people did everything right and these people did everything wrong, I don't feel like that's the case in this case. I feel like both sides have made decisions that definitely could have been made better. And I don't think anybody comes out of this looking like, oh, well, we did everything right and they screwed us over. So anyway, I'm just going to just kind of wanted to put that out there as we get into it. So anyway, so let me back up and give some historical information for folks. I know that there are a lot of people that are newer to the community and haven't been around for all of the things that we've kind of lived through over the last 15 or 20 years. I've been programming Ruby for around 20 years. And so I've kind of seen a lot of the things that add up to this, and so I want to give that context as well. Essentially, the situation, I'll just give a little bit of that, and then I'll go back historically, so that you can kind of see where it's headed. But the situation is that a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, sounds like it was in early September or maybe late August, Ruby Central. So some people came out who work on some of the projects like RubyGems.org, the RubyGems command line interface, and bundler. And they said that they had their access to the repositories revoked, that the organizations on GitHub that those repositories belong to had been reassigned to Marty Hott, who's the director of open source at Ruby Central. And then I guess they got their access back for a little bit, and then they had their access finally revoked. So then people were saying, well, hey, you're essentially taking these projects that people work on for the community out of their hands. And so people were saying it was a hostile takeover and things like that. I'm finding that there's a lot more context here, right? So like I said before, I think the reasons that Ruby Central is doing what it's doing are understandable. And I think their approach could have been much, 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 much better. And I also understand where the contributors are coming from because they've been working on this stuff for a really, really, really long time. So let's rewind way back, right? And let's talk about the way things worked when I started doing Ruby back in like 2006. So I was working for a company that I was actually running their tech support department, and we built the infrastructure for our support teams in Rails. Me and another guy that were running the support team. And back then, when you built a Ruby or Rails application, there was no gem file, right? No bundler, didn't exist. And so what you would do is you would do a gem install on your machine, and it would run whatever version of Ruby you had on your machine. And there weren't these convenient switchers like RVM or RBN. And so you just had to have the right version on your computer, have the right gems installed, and then you would require them and it would pull them out of wherever you had them installed. And so if you had gem incompatibilities, you would get errors when you ran your Ruby code. And as applications got more complicated, especially for Rails applications, dependency management became a huge nightmare. And then when you upgraded from one version of Rails to another, it became even more of a nightmare. So when we transitioned from Rails 2 to Rails 3, and Yehuda Katz and Carl Lerche, I can't remember how to say his name. Anyway, Yehuda did most, he was kind of the front man for a lot of the work. He was the one that was out there giving the talks and things like that. And so I kind of want to give him more credit, but I don't know how much of the work was done by either of those guys. And I can't remember if Tom Dale was involved in that or not, or if he just got involved later and was more of an influence in Ember, which is a JavaScript framework. But anyway, so they did this work, and they had been working on a competitor to Rails called Merb, and Rails and Merb decided to merge, and so they merged, and that upgrade was kind of a big move. But a few of the things that came out of that were eventually we got Bundler from a lot of that work. And I think Carl and Yehuda were the ones that started it. For a really, really long time, Andre Arco was the one that was kind of spearheading the work on that. And so we got Bundler from that. It changed a lot of things because then you could just put stuff into the gem file, and Bundler would figure out what dependencies you needed, and it would align all that stuff. And then if it couldn't find compatible versions with everything that you've asked for, then it would tell you. And so anyway, that became kind of this critical thing. RubyGems, the CLI, and RubyGems, the server, were around before I was programming Ruby. And so a lot of that work was done by Eric Hodel and some of the other folks around there. And my understanding is that for the RubyGems.org service, somebody had to pay the server bills, right? And Ruby Central had kind of been formed to run RubyConf and RailsConf. And so it's my understanding that they just took that under their wing, kind of formed something that looks like a foundation. I'm not sure if they're organized in the same way as kind of like the Rails Foundation or some of the other open source foundations like Linux Foundation. But ultimately, they have corporate sponsors. And I think they were actually making money from the conferences. And anyway, they were able to pay for the infrastructure to run RubyGems.org. And so, they've hosted those servers and things like that. And then, of course, over the years, people have become more sophisticated in the way that they try and compromise people's software. And one of them are supply chain attacks. And so, they've had to become much more sophisticated in the way that they handle requests or, posting of RubyGems and things like that to make sure that when you pull in a gem that it's what you expect it to be and it doesn't have any malicious code in it or open up vulnerabilities in your application and things like that. And I think they do a pretty good job of that. I can't think of any major problems that that have come from RubyGems itself. And if there have been issues, they've been on top of fixing those, right? Most of the time it's, we overlooked a thing in, a gem or something, right? And so then you get a patch to Rails or something like that. But anyway, so that's where a lot of this comes from. And then A few years ago, I say a few, but I think it was probably like 10 or more years ago. A lot of these folks were spending quite a bit of time maintaining a lot of these projects for the Ruby community, right? So RubyGems.org and Bundler in particular. And so, and it's all open source software, and they weren't really getting paid. This was before you could sponsor people on GitHub. And there really weren't other terrific mechanisms for people to say, hey, I'm doing this work that benefits you. Do you want to throw me a few bucks? And so they founded a group called Ruby Together. And what Ruby Together did is it collected a fund similar to Ruby Central, right, where you have these companies that are donating to them, and then they were able to pay the open source maintainers at least something for kind of the above and beyond amount of time that they were spending on Bundler and RubyGems and RubyGems.org, so that they could provide us with secure functional tools that do the job that we need them to do. And that all made sense, right? It was kind of in a time where I felt like some of the social agendas were starting to crop up, and they were a little bit vocal on that. But for the most part, they mostly were just raising money for the infrastructure work that they were doing, right? And so, great. We still get all of the goodies for free. They're doing work that we all need done. They're getting paid for it, which I think is great. And so more power to them. And so my understanding is about 3 to 5 years ago, Ruby Central and Ruby Together figured out that they were basically going and asking for support from the same groups, from the same folks, right? Because the folks that support Ruby Central are companies that use Ruby on a regular basis. So Shopify and, Basecamp and whoever, right? They all run on Ruby and use the Ruby infrastructure. And so they were giving money to Ruby Central, but then a lot of the infrastructure that's supported by Ruby Central runs on software that's being developed by Ruby Together. And so they decided to merge. And so they did. And they merged. And so what wound up happening was now Bundler, RubyGems.org, and RubyGems are all maintained by Ruby Central, along with the conferences that they are no longer going to do. I don't know if they're going to still do RubyConf, but they publicly announced that they are not going to do RailsConf. So, anyway, so that's kind of where we wind up sitting for a while, right? Is Ruby Central is paying the developers, as contractors, basically. So they're paying a lot of these people to work on the RubyGems infrastructure and the Bundler infrastructure and a lot of this other stuff that we use all the time. And Ruby Central is now responsible for all of this infrastructure in our supply chain to get us gems, right? And so you can kind of see where we're headed with this, right? So if they have a responsibility for that, then they might have some liability if there's a supply chain attack and the problems aren't handled properly. And so it's my understanding, and again, this is, I talked to a whole bunch of people. I can't really name any one source for this. It's been gathered over a number of conversations, but my understanding is that the board at Ruby Central started getting legal advice that indicated that they could have some level of of liability if there was a supply chain attack. And the other concern was that the developers that work on these systems didn't really have the kinds of liability protections that they ought to, right? So if somebody made a mistake building RubyGems, the CLI, and somebody else was able to exploit that and do a mass supply chain attack, they might be personally liable. And so there were these concerns that were coming up, but mainly if Ruby Central gets sued and gets taken down, then who's going to run RubyGems.org and who's going to do the work to protect the supply chain and things like that? So, and here's where I'm not going to represent anything that I haven't heard or don't know. But it's my understanding that they determined that they needed to amend the agreements they had with these other open source maintainers so that Ruby Central could protect itself in the case of, something going really badly. And on the other side, provides some level of indemnification to the bundler and RubyGems maintainers, right? So that if something happened and they got personally sued, that Ruby Central would be in a position to help protect them from legal jeopardy. And so the other thing is, and I've seen this in other open source systems where if you contribute to a project, so legally under US law, if you write code, you own the code. And so usually if you're working on some kind of system that's out there at all, then especially if it has a license that's not like MIT, right? Because if it's MIT license, the license basically says, take this and do whatever you want with it, right? And so then there's not really any, like I can't come after you for using my code because it's MIT license, right? If I licensed it MIT, it says explicitly in there, you can do whatever you want with it. And so I'm essentially giving over my copyright protection on the code and allowing you to do what you want with it. But some of the other licenses out there don't allow that. And so then what happens is a lot of times you'll have a contributor agreement that says, if you contribute to our code base, then we own the code and we control the license and we're able to put it out however we want, right? And so then they can continue to maintain it under an Apache license or things like that. And they don't have any obligation to you to, they don't have to get your permission if they want to do something else with the project later. And so it gives the project owner flexibility. And so it's my understanding that that's kind of the direction that Ruby Central was looking to go to, where they could then have these kinds of contributor agreements that would allow them to operate and have a little more control over how RubyGems, RubyGems.org, and things like that were managed. But if you look at it from the other side, I mean, some of these folks have been working on these projects for more than 10 years and have done a ton of work, and they've kind of operated in this arena where they didn't have as much oversight, and they didn't have people telling them what they could and couldn't do. And, they felt a sense of ownership over the project, which, I think is terrific. And so Ruby Central coming in and saying, hey guys, we need you to sign these agreements and do X, Y, and Z in order to continue to work on this project. And, we're going to take a more active and controlling role on this open source project that you've just worked on and contributed, hours and hours and years of your life to, right? We're taking a level of ownership away from you. I totally understand these people going, whoa, wait a minute, right? We don't remember signing up for this, right? We signed up for, hey, let's fund this stuff in the way that it gets funded, right? But I also can see the side of things from Ruby Central's angle, where they're looking at it and going, if we own and are responsible for the code in Bundler, in the RubyGems CLI and RubyGems.org, and something bad happens, even though we didn't do it, right? It's a contributor that's here, that's contracted through us. We bear the brunt of that liability. And so we need to have certain guarantees in order to be able to say, no, we've done everything we can. Because then if they get sued and they say, look, we did everything we could, we followed all the best practices, right? We shouldn't be held liable for a thing that is impossible to foresee and where there's not really a good practice for protecting against it, right? Then they can put together a much more sound defense, because at the end of the day, they can tell the court, no, we did everything we were supposed to do, right? It's not negligence or malice on our part, and so we can't be held liable, right? And so I understand both sides. I understand the push and pull. So here's where things kind of get a little dicey for me on the Ruby Central side, right? Because for the most part, I understand where Ruby Central is coming from, and I support them in what they were doing as far as their motivations and things like that, right? I haven't seen any evidence that suggests that this was some kind of hostile takeover, that there's some ego involved, or that there's some kind of, malicious intent to screw over the community, or some political gamesmanship that has to do with these contributors. I haven't seen any evidence of that at all. And so for the most part, I think Ruby Central was just trying to do the right thing. And they did it really, 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 really poorly. Right? Because the first thing they should have done is they should have been doing all of this in public. Right? I understand that maybe they don't want to publicize, hey, we have this legal exposure, right? If any of this happens, then we're legally liable, and so we're trying to fix it. Hey, folks, don't sue us in the meantime, right? That's not the best way to go. But what they could have done is they could have said, and they could have come out and announced, right? Hey, we are putting a new policy in place for contributors, so that we have these kinds of guarantees on the work that they do, and we're providing these kinds of protections for the contributors on the work that they do, and we're just trying to kind of button up some areas so that we can protect the community and that we can protect we can protect Ruby Central, right? And that way we can continue to provide services, we can continue to work on these libraries, and we can continue to give people what they need, right? And maybe, not in so many words tell us, that they're trying to, for the longevity of the system, to make these changes, and then acknowledge, right, that this may be painful, and that the contributors are probably used to working under different constraints, and we're working to make sure that this is as painless as possible. Because then when you go in and you eventually revoke access, or try and get really, maybe even twist arms a little bit to get them to sign these agreements, then people know it's coming. They know what's up. They know that the Ruby Central, I keep wanting to say the foundation, but again, I don't know if it's organized that way. But at the end of the day, right, just so that people can see this coming and go, oh, well, they obviously wouldn't agree to the terms on Ruby Central. And yeah, I'm frustrated on behalf of these folks, but it was all done above board. It was all transparent. We all knew it was coming, right? And then they can come out and they can make similar announcements, because these people are people that we all really rely on, and in a lot of cases at least trust, right? We trust their code and things like that. So they had to know that these folks have a little bit of pull, and that if it's painful for them, we are all going to know, and a lot of us are going to be sympathetic to them, right? And so, and again, I don't know what level they had communication with the contributors themselves. It sounded like they were somewhat blindsided or completely blindsided, and that's not okay, right? And so what Ruby Central should have done is they should have done this all above board and transparently, so that people could kind of connect the dots and see it all coming. And they definitely should have been talking to contributors, right? This should not have been a surprise to the contributors. It should have been hey, look, this is the contributor agreement that we're gonna enforce. If you have any concerns, or you think we could change things in it, right, we're welcome to talk through it, right? This is what we're aiming to do with liability and longevity and things like that. And so ultimately, we're just trying to do the best by you, but also make sure that we're doing right by the community. And so then then you might have some of the contributors coming out and saying, no, they told us a while ago, and we've been negotiating on the contributor agreement, and and so these are the areas where it broke down. These are the couple of things in the agreement that I didn't like, and so ultimately I wound up not signing it and resigning. Right? That it just changes the whole tenor of the thing. Right. And then on the other side, right, then we can also see that they're negotiating in good faith. Right. Anyway, so Ruby Central just screwed this up like massive, big time. And then the other thing I understand is that somebody in who was one of the major contributors, left Ruby Central. And so they had to replace somebody anyway. And so my understanding is that caused the board to want to accelerate the timeline, because whoever they brought in was going to be working on some pretty major stuff. And if they brought them in, they could just have them under the agreement to begin with. And so it's my understanding that they started looking at that. And then that's when the board essentially directed the folks that run the infrastructure to start removing access and, changing the GitHub organization and things like that. And so that kind of happened in a hurry all at once. And again, that was something that they really shouldn't have done. Because there's no reason that they can't bring the new people on under some kind of agreement and keep the old people on under, and just tell them, look, we're starting to bring, more important players in this system in under the agreement. So we need to get you on the agreement by this date. Right. And then work with the contributors. So anyway, so that, that's kind of the mess. Now, a couple of other things that happened were so RubyGems.org got forked. And I need to go look up, I think it's ruby.coop. I'll have to find it. I was reading up on it the other day. Anyway, so yeah. So kind of the way that things are looking now. Yeah, I'll find the link. But anyway, feel free to go check it out. I'm personally not. I'm going to keep using RubyGems until I feel like I have a real reason to switch. Right now, I think again, I think they're trying to act in the best interest of the community. But at the end of the day, yeah. And anyway, it might not be ruby.coop, but it might be like co-op is the way that they're looking at it. Anyway, so gem.coop, there we go. Okay. So it's gem.coop. It's at gem.coop. So it's a new RubyGems server. Looks like Mike McQuaid is helping them set it up. And it kind of follows the homebrew model. And then, yeah, you can swap in your bundle your gem file. You can swap out rubygems.org to gem.coop. So anyway, and yeah, so the contributors are upset. They went and started their own thing. But this is where it gets a little bit weird on the contributor side. So apparently, and there was a whole write-up on this on Ruby Central, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But apparently, so they went and they revoked everybody's access to the repos, right? But they're all public repos, so you can go and you can fork it, right? Not a big deal. And so I'm assuming that's what gem.coop is doing, is they just forked rubygems.org, and then they're seeding it with whatever gem information they have. But it's all hosted on AWS. And apparently the root access certificate or credential wasn't rotated when they removed people's access to the other stuff. And so a lot of folks were still able to access the rubygems.org servers. And so this is the other part of the drama. And, and a lot of people have weighed in and said, no, RubyGems, blah, blah, blah. I've heard some people try and pin a lot of this on Shopify. I don't find any of that evidence compelling. I really think that it was just the RubyGems board and them really screwing it up. Anyway, so a lot of the contributors who had helped maintain the systems still had access to the RubyGems servers. And so the folks at Ruby Central actually posted some of the emails that they got from Andre Arco, where he was saying, hey, maybe we could monetize or otherwise lease the log information from rubygems.org and, work out some kind of arrangement where they could use that. And Ruby Central told them no, told him and whoever was working with him no. But then they showed that and he told him he still had access to the servers, and apparently they didn't solve that in a timely manner, right? There was a few days and he still logged in, and they imply that it was him without actually directly saying it. They imply that it was Andre that was getting in. The evidence really does point that way, but I haven't seen the logs firsthand or anything to be able to definitively say, no, this really, really implicates Andre. So I'm a little uncomfortable attaching his name to it, but somebody who had that level of access logged in, and then they started changing credentials on the RubyGems server. And so the folks at Ruby Central couldn't get in. They couldn't get into the AWS setup. And so they wound up having to contact AWS and doing a credentials reset. And then they went in and they fixed it all up. But they could see that whoever it was had logged in several times, had accessed a bit of information. It didn't look like they had copied anything off, but anyway, there are a couple of things here that just kind of really make me scratch my head. I mean, and then Andre came out later and so that this is where it really looks like it was him. He said in his blog post that he went in and was changing the credentials so that the system wouldn't get compromised. But the way that it was explained on Ruby Central and, the logs that they presented and things like that, some of that just doesn't quite add up to what Andre says he was doing in there. And the other thing is that I think he probably could have done more to just kind of force them around. Because, I mean, at some point you're going to, you could get enough public outcry from the community saying, you guys are putting us all at risk if you don't change this. But anyway, but the flip side is then anybody who wants to go in and try and hack it, right, might be able to get in. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer would have been, but I think there were better ways for him to handle it. And the other thing is that if he wanted that data because it would help them set up gem.coop and make gem.coop, run better or know what kinds of performance aspects or, access patterns or anything else. I mean, all of that stuff would have been in those logs and probably could have helped them get that set up. And so that doesn't sit quite right with me. And just, getting in and accessing stuff that way when you've been, when they've basically let you go from the organization and stuff like that doesn't sit right with me either. And so I have some really, really grave concerns there. I've also seen Andre do some other things where he's gone on the attack against other people. And so he seems like, as far as like a maintainer or bundler, I think he's done a terrific job. But as a member of the community, I think sometimes he is a little bit of a loose cannon and the way that he approaches some of these issues. And so I'm very not comfortable with, letting him off the hook either. In fact, if I were Ruby Central, I would be giving a serious look to, what repercussions can come against him. I don't know that I necessarily want them to sue him or anything, but it's like, hey, look, how do we curb this so that other bad actors aren't going to do this kind of thing, right? That they'll play ball in a way that actually is ethical, because I think it was unethical for him to log in and do any of the stuff that he did. But again, I mean, he said he was just trying to change the credentials. And if that's true, then maybe he deserves the benefit of the doubt. But some of the other things that were done on the servers, I don't know. But it does look like he didn't actually compromise the systems. And so anyway, I'm going back and forth mostly because I don't know if I want them to throw the book at him, but I don't think he should get away with it either, because I don't think what he did was right. So anyway, whatever the appropriate outcome is there, I don't know if I have a proper recommendation. But anyway, so that's where things are sitting. I've told a few people at Ruby Central at this point that what they need to do is they need to just come out and come clean on all this stuff, right? Just say, hey, look, this is where the decisions were made. These are the constraints we were working under. These are the concerns that we had. And so this is what we did. And this is the stuff we got right. This is the stuff we got wrong. And these are the procedures that we're going to put into place to make sure that we don't mess it up again. Right. And that way the contributors can all be comfortable that they're not going to pull anything where they feel like they're getting screwed over. And then also, feel like the gem repositories and stuff like that are all in good hands. Right. That, hey, look, yeah, we should have changed the credentials and rotated the credentials. And so we have a procedure for that now. And, we just go through the whole list of things whenever somebody, is no longer a contributor, right. To make sure that only authorized people have access and, just stuff like that. Right. And just make sure that everybody knows. And then, just do a big mea culpa and just say, hey, look, we know we messed up. And so this is what we're doing to be more transparent so that people don't have to be concerned over the infrastructure or over the treatment of the contributors, because the contributors are working for us for free in a lot of cases. Or if they are getting paid by Ruby Central, I don't think it's full time. I think it's just part time. And so they've got to go figure out other stuff in order to make stuff work. And so, do right by those guys. Right. And then on the other side, I think we deserve a much better explanation from Andre regarding accessing those servers. Honestly, it makes it really hard for me to trust him, just because it seems like there are some kinds of ulterior motives here, but I don't know what they are. I don't know if gem.coop is supposed to have some kind of commercial backing, or right. So maybe they'll offer like private gem repositories and stuff like that, like NPM eventually wound up doing, or stuff like that. And so anyway, I'd like to see a lot of that. And then I think honestly, we need to have an honest discussion in the community and just be like, okay, so at the end of the day, what's our expectation from these organizations they're doing this work, and from contributors to our kind of core offerings in the community. And then we need to make sure that these folks know that these are the expectations we all have. And then lastly, when they do stuff right, I think we ought to show a little more appreciation, right? So like I said, the work that's been done on Bundler and RubyGems and RubyGems.org, right? Regardless of, some of maybe the bad things that were done, I mean, I've benefited from that work. And so, a hearty thank you to the people that are making those contributions. And at the same time, I have a friend that kind of messed his life up making some poor decisions. And so, as he was going through some of the consequences for the things that he did, I went to lunch with him multiple times. I tried to support him as best I could, but I looked at him and I said, you're never going to get me to give you a pass on what you did. Right. But at the same time, I'm going to support you in moving forward in the right way to make things right. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at with these folks, right? It's like, look, you screwed up. I'm not giving you a pass. I think I can eventually forgive you if you prove out that you're going to do it right. And in the meantime, let me support you in doing the right thing. And so, anyway, hopefully that helps kind of paint a little bit more of the picture for people, so that you all understand, what's going on and where things are at. And then, at this point, besides kind of supporting people and doing the right thing, I personally, I don't feel like it's picking sides to say that I'm sticking with RubyGems until, they prove that I can't trust them. And then, the behavior as far as like logging into the servers and stuff, I don't think that using gem.coop is necessarily dangerous, or, that I can't trust them to take care, because I think they have an interest in making that service work and work as best it can. But it does create a trust issue for me with Andre. So, Yeah, some of that would probably have to be resolved before I'm full-throated endorsing, switching or adding them as a source in your gem file. So anyway, that's kind of where things sit for me. I'm sure that there are things that will come out later or that I haven't heard that are involved. There are a lot of other opinions that have come out on this stuff. Ara Howard came out and was pretty vocally upset with Ruby Central. I've seen other people come out and say I'm not taking sides. They kind of took the tack that I did and said both sides screwed up. I've heard people come out and say both sides screwed up, but I still trust Ruby Central and have kind of defended them. And I feel like I guess I've kind of done that to some degree. But at the end of the day, do your homework, go figure out what's going on, figure out if this changes anything for you. And then let's go and write beautiful code that makes us happy. All right, so I'm going to switch over. I'm going to do some picks. So my first pick, I always pick a game. I might have picked this one on the show before. I'm going to pick it again if so. And if not, then you're hearing about a terrific game. It is called Infiltrators. And it's not spelled like infiltrators, the regular word. It's spelled like infiltrators if the last part of the word was spelled like traitors, like people who betrayed their country. And so anyway, so it has an extra I in it, basically. It is a card game. And it has essentially, it comes with a deck of cards, not face cards. It has its own cards. And they're all, I think there are 5 colors, numbered 2 to 15. And what you're doing is you have traitors that are basically cards you're trying to figure out what they are. And so each player will pick up so you have a hand of cards, and then you have a card in front of you that's face down. And so people can hand you a card that you use as a clue to let them know what the card is that's face down in front of you. And so if you put it sideways, it means it has nothing in common with the card that's face down, right? So if it's a blue 2, then it means that the card is not blue and it's not a 2, but the 2 has all of its multiples on it. So it has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14 on it. And it means that your card that's face down is not a blue and it's not a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, or 14, right? If you hand you the blue 15, then it has the factors of 15 on it. And so you know that it's not a 3 or 5 or a 15, and you know it's not blue. If it's faced the other way, then you know it's a blue or a 3, a 5, or a 15, or both, right? But there's only one copy of every card, and so if it's the blue 15, you know it's not the blue 15, right? Does that make sense? So anyway, so you clue until you get the cards. There's a prop gun, and you get so many bullets because you execute the traitors. Eventually, we just got to the point where we just point and say, that's the red 3, right? And so sometimes people would pick up the gun and use it, but I'm executing, but most of the time people just point. So if you don't like the gun in the imagery, you don't have to have it, and you can use other markers instead of bullets. But anyway, there's a little dry erase card that has all the numbers and all the colors on it, so you can mark off the ones you know that it's not. Anyway, it's a super fun game. It's a deduction game. You're working together to, expose all the traitors. It has different levels that you play through, kind of like, the crew. And so anyway, fun game. So, definitely go check that game out. Board Game Geek has it weighted at 2.11. I always tell people 2 is kind of complicated enough to be interesting, but simple enough that a casual, not hardcore gamer would enjoy it. And so I'm going to pick Infiltrators as that. And then the other thing I wanted to just put out there is there are 2 things that have happened over the last month, maybe, since we were recorded last, that I just wanted to talk about briefly. So one of them is the hostages in Israel were returned. And I get that there are people that have feelings about the whole conflict in Israel, right, on both sides. And I'm not going to wade into that. I have my own opinions on it. But, the hostages look like they were mistreated. it is terrific that they get to come home to their families. And it looks like the killing has stopped for a while, which is also a good thing, regardless of which side you come down on. And so I am going to pick peace because I'm all for it. I've seen some people saying we want peace, but we don't want Donald Trump to negotiate it. I frankly don't care who negotiates it as long as we get it, right? And as long as we can make it last. So, if it raises Donald Trump's status, fine. If it raises somebody else's status, right? If it's Barack Obama over there negotiating it and that's what's effective, right? We're not killing people as much anymore. So, which is a good thing. We got hostages back, which is a good thing. And hopefully the bodies of the other hostages come back and those families can have closure. It's a good thing. And then the other one, and this affected me much more deeply. And a lot of it's because it occurred here at Utah Valley University, which is like 15 minutes away from where I'm sitting in my house. Maybe 20 minutes. Depends on traffic, I guess. And that was the Charlie Kirk assassination. And, this kind of speaks a little bit to what we're talking about here, except, nobody's getting killed over RubyGems. But we go out a lot of times and we just demonize the other people on the other side. And I think a lot of that rhetoric was what led to somebody shooting him here. And it's sad, right? It's like, for me, it's, hey, look, and I agree with Charlie on a lot of the things that he talked about, right? But at the end of the day, we need to be good to each other. We need to understand each other, right? This kind of violence, celebrating that somebody got killed, the way that we treat each other sometimes because you're on the other side of the political aisle, it's not okay. And I think a lot of times if we just go talk to people and understand where they're coming from and what they're worried about and what they're dealing with and all of that stuff, things get a whole lot better. And sure, maybe I don't come around to the other person's way of thinking, but at least I can understand them, right? At least I can think about it and say, okay, do they have a good argument or do they not have a good argument and why? And then maybe I can argue my understanding better next time. Or maybe I change my mind, or maybe I just change it a little bit, right? It's like, no, they're generally not right about this stuff, but these couple of points tell me that, yeah, maybe there's a little bit more nuance here or there within this space. And I think if we can understand each other that way, maybe we can heal. I hear too about like people's families being torn apart because, people do or don't like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever else. And, it's like, hey, there are so many more important things that we have in common. And so I really am I guess I'm picking peace again, but mostly I want people to come to understand each other, right? Show some respect to each other, be good to each other. And anyway, so yeah, sorry to end on kind of a low note, but yeah, hopefully this helps some folks get some context on this stuff. I guess one last pick. So I am getting things together on Top End Devs so that we can relaunch Ruby Geniuses. I had Ruby Geniuses running before, and it kind of fizzled out a little bit. So I'm bringing it back. I want to be doing the Ruby Book Club. I tried to do like a general programmer book club, and I just figured out that that's not really, I mean, we read some interesting stuff, but I think doing a Ruby focused one is a much better approach. Because then we can get into stuff that's relevant to stuff that you're working on at work. And then I'm going to be putting out videos for the Ruby tip of the day. I'm going to be putting out a series kind of like Go Rails or Railscast or Drifting Ruby that is essentially AI on Ruby. And I'd like to get some series going on just Ruby or just Rails, right? Or some blend. And so if you're interested in authoring something like that, I'm happy to talk through some of that with you. And then I'm also looking at putting courses and stuff up on Top End Devs. I kind of want to make it the Netflix for programmers. And so then you can come in and instead of like horror and comedy and, whatever, you can come in and it's Ruby, JavaScript, DevOps, infrastructure as code, right? And so then you can kind of pick your topic, and then you can find whatever it is that you're looking for, right? And so I'm working through that, and I'm looking for authors. So if you want to author a series on that, or if you just listen to Ruby Rogues and you mostly write Go or something like that, I'm looking at pulling some stuff together in some of those other areas like Go, React, JavaScript, and things like that. So, and I really want to kind of become the central place for people to come to get up to date information on how to build AI and use AI tools in development. So anyway, that's what I'm kind of heading toward here. Maybe I'll give like the full vision and a little bit of the history on that. But anyway, in the meantime, be good to each other. We'll get past this as a community. And until next time, Max out.